This short video is just going to do a little bit more about using formulas in Excel and how to calculate an average and a standard deviation. So what I've done is generate some sample data shown here, where we have the mass of a sample of sucrose that was weighed 8 times. And what we're going to try and do is calculate the average mass, the standard deviation of that sample set, and the relative standard deviation. And then what we're then going to do is calculate the number of moles for each of these using the molar mass of sucrose, which is shown here. So first we can go ahead and get our average. So we have our data set, and so all I'm going to do is come down to this first cell and go ahead and hit the equals key to start our formula. And once I've done that, I'm going to come up to our formula bar and click on the FX button. And when I do that, we're going to see our function come up, our function box. So we can just resize this so you can see. And so once our function's up, we can click average, and I'm going to double click on that. And then it's going to ask you for the range that you want the average. And so you want to make sure the correct data is highlighted. If it's not, you can edit it, or you can click this little box and highlight it yourself. So in this case, I only need to go to C15, hit enter, and there we have our average. We can do the similar thing for standard deviation. Click on the empty cell, hit equals, and then we can find the standard deviation function. You can see it comes up as my most recently used. If you didn't have it there, you can start to find it. Standard deviation, it's the abbreviation STDEV. And again, in this case, it didn't choose the correct data, so I'm going to tell it what data I want this data set, and hit return. There's our standard deviation. And now for the relative standard deviation, if you recall, that's going to be the standard deviation divided by the average times 100. And so I'm going to go ahead and make that into a formula, and I'll start with the equals key. We're going to take our standard deviation, we're going to divide it by the average, and we're going to take that whole thing and multiply it, multiply by 100, and that gives us our relative standard deviation. Again, if we want to think about sig figs, we can reduce the number of decimals here to a more appropriate number, maybe something like that. And there's our data. So what we can do next is we can calculate the number of moles of our sample. So if this is our mass in grams, we can convert between mass and moles using the molar mass of our sample. And I put that in a cell over here, 342.3. And so in order to get to moles, we have to take our mass, and we need to divide it by the molar mass. So I'm going to create a formula to do that. There's a couple ways you can do this, but I want to show you another trick to Excel. Is what I'm going to do is hit equals. I'm going to take my mass, and then I'm going to tell Excel to divide it by the molar mass. Okay, but I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to take this molar mass, and up into my formula bar up here, I'm going to put dollar signs in front of and after the letter of the cell I5. And the reason I'm doing that is now I'm going to hit return, and that's going to calculate the number of moles. And what the dollar signs tell Excel is I'm going to now fill this formula down. So I'm going to take this formula and I'm going to fill it. And what it is doing is, as it goes through, and you can see, watch the bar up here, as we go through each cell, what's being divided is the mass here by the 342. Go down to the next cell, and you can see it's each cell we're changing now C11, C12, C13, C14. By putting the dollar signs in front and after the letter, it holds this cell in place, and you can fill your formula down, and it changes the location of this first cell. So now we can calculate average and standard deviation of these. And so I could recreate these formulas, but you'll also notice, oops, the other way of doing this is just to highlight all of these and fill this formula over, and it's going to carry those average, standard deviation, and relative standard deviations across. In this case, we might need some more decimal places for these two, so I'm going to go ahead and tell it to increase the number of decimal places, and there we have it. And there would be the average mass in grams and the average moles that are present. Thank you.